Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday. We're on Tuesday, July 6th, 2021. Time for another show. We missed the show yesterday, of course, because we were celebrating America. There was no way to just ignore America and come and do the show, right? Interesting story about how I dug up yesterday's, well, it ended up not being all that interesting, about how I dug up yesterday's rerun. But as you know, a couple of days ago, we played one from 5 years ago, and so I thought maybe something similar might be of interest for the July 5th show, July 5th being the day off, the Monday off for the July 4th holiday. And although I had quite enough, and I saw some nice fireworks, I can tell you all about that. It was fun. I hope you had a great time celebrating independence, too, and being independent from a brand new show as well. But anyway, I went digging around for an older show, and I thought the only complaint there was, if you can call it that, about playing the 5-year-old show, which is actually part of the reason that Mighty OCD, who had suggested it, thought it might be interesting, was play one from the run up to the I guess the end of the before times. Not the pandemic before times, but the Donald Trump before times. Something from 2016. And it might be very interesting to take a look that far back. And then, like I said, not really a complaint, but the worry, the thing that bothered people, I guess, a little bit about it, the downside of the show, was they got a sense of how clueless, everybody was to the real catastrophe that was coming. I mean, we all knew that Donald Trump would be a disaster if he were elected president, but at the time, we just didn't believe it, could really happen. There were certainly plenty of people saying, don't write it off, blah, 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 Reagan, etc. But, the conventional wisdom was that he would not win, that he'd be crushed, a true professional and totally prepared person running against a totally unprepared and, just somebody who just wasn't intellectually capable of taking over the role. It was hard to imagine that they would be able to debate their way through this, that people wouldn't pay attention, that people would say, oh, he didn't reveal his taxes? All right, well, what are you going to do? That makes him smart, as his line was. Anyway, I guess people found that at least slightly depressing. Anyway, very interesting, but a little bit depressing. And I thought, well, maybe we'll go even further back. And what's the earliest July 5th show that I've got? And usually when it comes to this stuff, I look back at the Libsyn archives. Libsyn doesn't have the complete archive of the show from its very beginnings. We weren't using Libsyn to distribute the podcast at first. But we moved over there fairly early. And if you're ever interested, you can take a look at KagroX, easy enough to figure out, kagrox.libsyn.com. What do I spell for you here? KagroX. That I think you already know. You hear that enough times during the commercials. Libsyn, Libsyn. Liberated Syndication. You get it? All right, so kagrox.libsyn.com brings you to a kind of default web page that Libsyn makes available for its podcasters, and it just makes the most basic archive. And anyway, it'll show you that our archives with Libsyn go all the way back to 2012, but not until August of 2012 do we begin with Libsyn. I think our first Libsyn show, August 24th, 2012. A Friday, somehow. We decided we would switch over. Anyway, look, that's what happened. So I didn't have a July 5th, 2012 show readily available to me through the Libsyn archive, which is where I usually search the archives. Though I do have archives going further back. I don't know that any of them are online. I've got the shows saved on DVD. So, but the first thing I did was dig around, and actually I didn't even have to go further back, because when I went to play the July 5th, 2013 show. I figured I'd just move up to there. It turns out that on July 5th, 2013, we ran a rerun. Now, it must have been one of our first reruns. I don't know. But it was, in fact, the non-archived July 5th, 2012 show. So I went looking then. I said, must have it somewhere on DVD. And I went around looking for it in my DVD collection and found that I keep them stacked in order. You know, I just bought this bulk thing of DVDs to burn things onto. And in looking back, I found I had, from the beginning of 2012 or whatever it was, but July was missing. June was there, and August was there, but July was missing. So I figured maybe what happened was way back in July of 2013, needing a rerun, I went back to my July 2012 DVD, took the show, broadcast it as a rerun, and somehow the DVD never made it back to where it was supposed to be. But we did have the possibility of just borrowing the lower quality recording that's archived online and using that again. And for streaming it, you could probably not tell the difference, at least not too much. And it was a very interesting show, though, just to go all the way that far back. I mean, it was still the Obama presidency, or still the I guess before it was still the first term of the Obama presidency. And it was just very interesting to see what was going on at the time, what we were talking about, the things we were doing. But in the end, we decided, one, that, all right, well, the lower quality recording, that doesn't help anything. And then, of course, there were no breaks programmed into it. So, made a little bit more trouble for Justice, who I hope that we've remembered to program our breaks back in, by the way. Usually I want to give a reminder. So maybe I'll go and take care of that during one of our, during what's supposed to be one of our first breaks. And then we'll see whether I get a text from Scott saying, hey, you're not on break. And everybody can hear you, doing those underarm pump fart noise things that you do during the breaks normally where the microphone is muted. Anyway, very interesting just to look back at all of that. And maybe one day we can revive some of those really old shows. And as a matter of fact, I felt a little bit guilty about taking yesterday off. One, of course, because we were off the previous Wednesday, but that was, as I said, for a doctor's appointment. That kind of barely counts. I didn't get to sleep late or anything like that. Nothing fun or interesting going on that day. But also in the beginning of August, I have to start preparing for this and preparing you for all of this. Big trip with the family coming up, and I think this is probably the longest I will have been away for any purpose, with or without the show, maybe ever, for any reason, 2 weeks away. And one of our quick let's take some ecotourism trips before the whole world collapses series. Prior trip having been to Iceland, we now kind of go the opposite direction, not polar per se, opposite direction, but Costa Rica. Big trip to Costa Rica coming up, and that will take us 2 solid weeks of the beginning of August, which means I have to plan for something to be in our place, and exactly how we'll approach it, I am just not sure. But maybe if you have some suggestions, I liked very much Mighty OCD's suggestion about pulling an older show, and I don't know, maybe some of you are, in fact, such rabid fans that you have specific memories of specific shows that you would like to see rerun. Anyway, open to suggestions, and anytime you want to send them along, you let me know. Let's see. So today being Tuesday, we have Joan McCarter normally lined up for a Tuesday, but our biggest problems with remembering to connect are usually these holiday weekends that where the work week begins on a Tuesday, because you're always sort of in Monday mode, and you forget that it is in fact Tuesday, and sometimes she forgets to call. But actually, I think it's happened once. And then we worry about it every once in a while, every time there's one of these holiday weekend Tuesdays. But it's never been a problem since, so I don't know why I keep bringing it up. I don't mean to embarrass her or anything. The bigger problem is usually that there's so much additional news to cover because there's an extra day where we really haven't gotten around to rounding up the latest news stories, that the front page crew is just that much busier on a Tuesday, and it's that much more difficult to find the time to get away to call in. So we get the double whammy on that one. Anyway, Joan's ready, she says. So, that's really all you need to know. She says she's here. That's the end of it. And what's amazing is, how could you be listening to the show? Aren't you busy with some other stuff? This must be very distracting. Maybe this is why things don't get written up timely sometimes, or rather they take longer to get done. Actually, it kind of always shows up timely. That's one of the great things about the front page crew, is they can kind of work through anything. But it must be awfully distracting. But anyway, maybe now she must be monitoring to see whether I remember it's Tuesday. That could be. And that would be a welcome assistance, welcome service, because sometimes I don't remember either. But anyway, so now those of you who have tuned in either in the hopes of high drama, if you've tuned in about looking for the high drama of will she remember, that's gone. No need for any dramatic music or anything. It's all settled. For those of you tuning in to say, God, I hope she doesn't forget, I can't wait to get my fix with Joan McCarter, then, well, you're in luck. So that's good. I think we can move ahead from there. What happened over the weekend? Hell if I know. I was out recreating or doing what, actually I was doing a bunch of errands and running to every grocery store in the within a 50-mile radius looking for the various things that are only on sale at this one or that one. But how are your fireworks? We can ask people about that. I happened to find a great vantage point on Saturday night for the pre-July 4th, the July 3rd fireworks that were going on in our area, and everyone went with the Saturday night presentation instead of the Sunday, which was fine by me. Or was it the Sunday night presentation? Sunday. Yeah, it was Sunday. Okay, that's right. So Sunday night presentation with a couple of local shows going on the 5th, taking advantage of the day off, which I don't know, that didn't make much sense in terms of scheduling. But crazy fireworks here anyway. As let's see, at least 2 trucks worth of fireworks blew up over the weekend that I'm aware of. One was the one we mentioned on Friday, that I think out in L.A., where I guess they had confiscated illegal fireworks and put them in a bomb squad truck, and I don't know exactly what happened there, but some serious negligence happening. And they ended up detonating inside the truck, but I guess the truck wasn't fully secured. I mean, the purpose of a truck like that is that if something blows up inside, the surrounding area is safe from the blast. But I guess if you leave the doors open or whatever, it doesn't work. Meanwhile, by Saturday morning, I think I had heard that, or maybe it was Sunday morning, getting ready for the show, that the big fireworks display planned for Ocean City, Maryland, I guess, was being unloaded from the truck of the contractors who I guess had been hired to put on the show. You know, one of the big fireworks outlets, and something went wrong. I don't know what happened, but anyway, they set off the whole load of fireworks. The truck caught fire. I don't know, but at any rate, the whole fireworks load went off out of the truck. I don't think anybody was hurt in that situation. They actually planned very carefully. They were, being very professional about it. Even when they didn't expect anything to go wrong, I guess the whole area around fireworks trucks, when they have that kind of load, and they're doing things right, are cordoned off. So, whoops, all the fireworks went off during the day. Some people caught it on video and, of course, shared it on the online social media services. So we kind of got to see the Ocean City, Maryland show, just without the darkness that usually goes along with it. Oh, and also none of the height that comes along with it. We, on the other hand, went out to the heights of our local, I say municipality, but we're not really even a municipality. But anyway, out here in Loudoun County, we went out on the heights, and I think a unique vantage point where they are building condos on either side of this peak, but they haven't, the construction's just begun, so the areas are cleared on both sides. and we could see, I don't know, I would guess probably about 24 individual shows happening in different towns around the area. Everything from, we could see clear into Maryland, which is not too far from where we are across the Potomac River, but from the heights we were at, we could see down towards, I would think we were probably seeing like Manassas area, still all northern Virginia, generally speaking, but way out on the horizon, you could see shows everywhere, all the way up to, I don't even know what we were looking at, probably Gaithersburg, Bethesda, and, who knows, maybe even as far as Frederick, Maryland. I can't tell exactly how far we could see, but just every few feet on the horizon, if you turned around and around, you could just see shows all over the place. So it was kind of cool. That was very interesting. Don't know if that vantage point is going to be there again next year, as it'll be filled up with condos and of indeterminate height, and I don't know how much we'll be able to see from that same spot next year. Change! All right. Well, anyway, let's roll on to other news besides exploding trucks. I mean, there were plenty, but I think that's not the only thing that was going on, though it did occupy a lot of my time. What we have here, let's see, there's one, top of the list from Pocket is actually something I'm going to save for tomorrow when Greg Dworkin returns, because it's Connecticut specific. Did I put any Idaho news aside? I don't think so. Nothing this week that jumped out at me, but we'll ask what's going on in Idaho just to catch up on things. Over the weekend, some of the interesting news I mentioned on Friday or towards the end of the week, the launch of the pro-Trump social media app Getter, and they apparently had some difficulty over the weekend. Almost immediately upon launching, they were hacked. So I don't know whether that was particularly difficult. You remember, the first thing that occurred to me is we did read that they were trying to populate, they would help populate Getter by telling people who had big accounts on Twitter that they could reserve the same username, and they would find that their sign in, I don't know whether it was Twitter or Parler or one of the, or Gab, one of the right wing ones, or whether they were just trying to get Twitter people to move over there, and that their whole profile would be available to them on Getter, which is a great trick for getting people to switch, but I would think would be an enormous security risk, because I guess that kind of means that you're importing all sorts of access files over from the other place, and I don't know, seems to me like you were leaving yourself pretty vulnerable to hacking, and so it came to pass. It's funny, and I thought I would mention it, but I don't think it was particularly serious, because there's just not that much invested yet in that place, and who cares if it's hacked anyway. In addition to being hacked, apparently they were overrun by people who I guess were intent on ruining the place right from the start. I don't know whether that was the K-pop TikTok kids or some other group of users that just decided that they could overwhelm the place and fill it up with whatever their stupid meme of the day is, and I appreciate those kinds of stupid memes. But anyway, just wanted to let you know that that happened, and that's the big news for them so far. Something that Greg forwards us, and maybe something we ought to make mention of today. I'm sure I'll save some of it for discussion with him yesterday, but you've probably had this on your mind as well. So he's just sent me the Washington Post piece. You had the Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine. I didn't, but one of my sons did. Maybe you did too. Should you try to get a booster dose of Pfizer or Moderna? That's a good question. It was on everybody's mind, and for the past couple of weeks we've been thinking about it, because, it's an issue for my son, but actually it's beginning to look like things aren't quite so bad after all, and they're starting to get some data in on these things, and I'll give you the top line answer on this, the subheader. The J&J vaccine is robustly protective, and new data suggests it defends against the Delta variant too. So it's not all that big a worry as it turns out, but I guess questions still remain. J&J was always a little bit less effective anyway regardless, than Pfizer or Moderna. And though it is still largely effective against the Delta variant, I think it too is a little less effective against the Delta variant than the other vaccines. But I guess they're trying to tell us that the data says that it's effective enough that they might not necessarily end up recommending a combination booster from one of the other makers, along with your initial Johnson & Johnson shot. But, well, I just wanted to sort of let you know that that was out there. I'll share that article with you today because people who are very interested in that topic will want to see it immediately. And people who want a more in-depth discussion of it can tune in tomorrow, and we'll see whether we spend some time on that with Greg. Let's see, other things besides Getter being hacked. Very interesting profile written over the weekend or published over the weekend in the New Yorker, which this too, I guess, the first segment will be about things I won't read to you in its entirety, but that I find to be worth your time. And this profile it's not a profile of him per se, but a re-examination of the story of Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse, American Vigilante, is the somewhat provocative title of the piece in the New Yorker. Really a look back at the facts of his case and how things developed for him. And it's actually, I will warn you, it is a fairly sympathetic view of things from, in many cases, adding some of Rittenhouse's own perspective and the perspective of his family, but I think in an important way. And it's important, I think, for us to take a look at it. I don't know if it's really something that we can get all the way through in the show, but I will say this. My takeaway from it is that a lot of the things that we came, especially post-shooting, a lot of things we came away thinking about Kyle Rittenhouse, in case you don't recognize the name, and I don't know whether that's a problem among our audience, but he was is he like 17, then 17-year-old kid who was involved in the shootings, who shot the people at the protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin last summer, and I guess has since been created into this, one vigilante figure / unjustly accused when he had actually only defended himself, according to the gun enthusiasts, among whom he counts himself, and who showed up in Kenosha to, as they said, guard property. It was a very murky picture to begin with. And I don't know how open I would have said I was at the beginning of the reading to a profile that would offer some sympathetic view, I guess, of Rittenhouse. But I will say it was well done. Seems to be well researched and well written, certainly. It's Paige Williams is the author of this piece. And in the end, I thought the most important part, just by way of recommending it to you, was that it helped me feel a little bit better about some of the post-shooting public relations manipulation that went on around Rittenhouse. Like, I couldn't figure out how he got himself into these situations. The only way you could imagine him getting into these situations after the shooting was if he were really a terrible person at heart. And, I guess that was easy to believe, given that he had just shot a bunch of people. But for instance, when he showed up in a bar in the area, right, and he's only 18, he had just turned about 18, and he's out drinking with his mom there, and these weird, Proud Boy type people are with him, and it's videotaped and distributed on social media, and he shows up with the Black Rifle Coffee Company gear on, like he had a sponsorship of some sort everyone sort of guessed at. And then the Black Rifle Coffee Company paraphernalia started showing up, for instance, at the January 6th insurrection and the rest. But actually reasonable explainers, if you will, of how this poor clueless kid who did this terrible thing bounced around from one, influencer to another and didn't seem to have a real clear idea of what was, on offer from all of these people and what exactly he was getting himself into. So, doesn't declare him innocent by any stretch of the imagination. And, of course, it's on him and on his family to get their story straight and get themselves straight. And they have begun that process, I guess you could say. So, it doesn't change the fact that he shot those people, but it does begin to help us understand how something like this and how his chapter in history could come to pass. So very much recommended, and perhaps we spend some time on it later on, maybe later on in the week if we're looking for further understanding, or if you want some further understanding of it, I can excerpt some of the better and more interesting bits about this. All right, let's see. I guess that brings us actually to our first break. None too soon either. We're not quite there, but I'll throw in one other small bit that I happened to see over the weekend that I thought was, interesting, clever, may change the way things, the way news emerges in the future. Now that we are in the age of the YouTube video clip, a California police officer written up, I saw it in the Hill, who had come up with an interesting way to prevent himself from being shown all over YouTube. There was nothing untoward going on, but he wanted to make sure that he wasn't a unwitting YouTube star playing Taylor Swift music in the background on the premise that if you post this on YouTube, it'll be taken down for copyright.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Whew, it's actually quite warm in here all of a sudden, and I'm not sure exactly why, but okay. Any rate, nothing on fire, just checking around. No, nothing that I can see. All right, did you catch that on the way out for the first break there? I thought that was kind of an interesting and clever thing, but I guess it's a sign of the times, so to speak. I'll read you the quick piece from the Hill. California police officer plays Taylor Swift to prevent protesters' video from being posted to YouTube. I wonder whether we're going to run into any really serious problems with something like this. My guess is, as it happens, the video, likely wasn't going to be posted to YouTube anyway because nothing happened in it. It wasn't a police officer who was abusing anybody or, otherwise using excessive force who then attempted to prevent the video from being posted because he was playing Taylor Swift music. Why Taylor Swift? I'm not sure. Maybe that's just something he had ready access to. Or maybe she's a very aggressive YouTube in policing her work on YouTube. I'm not really sure. But as you might know, if you post something to YouTube and you use, or there's a significant amount of music involved that's copyrighted material, they will take down the video sometimes just preemptively for fear of copyright infringement lawsuit. They don't want to, lose money to Taylor Swift or her agent or whoever does the suing. And I think it's pretty much algorithmic too. There's just artificial intelligence, bots out there scanning the stuff, and if it recognizes, large enough swaths of copyrighted music, and I don't even know how large they set the thing, they will just automatically take your YouTube video down. So I thought that was actually kind of a clever way of making sure that the video doesn't get up there. The problem is what happens when it's actually, serious evidence of some real wrongdoing. And I wondered whether we were going to get to the point where we had a sort of a private justice system administered by millionaire entertainment and recording artists who would have to be approached individually and on a case-by-case basis, asked for a waiver of their copyright claims so that a legitimately newsworthy video could stay up. But we haven't reached that point yet. Let's see. Cameron Jenkins reporting again here for The Hill, and I'm sure consolidating reports from elsewhere in the media. But here's the background story. When a group of protesters arrived at the steps of a California courthouse this week to protest the pre-trial of an officer charged with killing a black man in a Walmart last year, serious events at the root of this situation, they weren't expecting to be serenaded with a Taylor Swift song. No, probably not. In a video that has been widely circulated on social media, but I guess not posted on YouTube, Sergeant David Shelby is seen responding to protesters, recording him as he confronts them over their placement of a banner by blasting Swift's 2014 hit single Blank Space from his cell phone. Is everybody familiar with the song? I don't even know if I am or not. I don't know if I would be able to recognize a Taylor Swift song by title, but probably if it got widespread radio play, I would recognize it from the tune, whatever. Anyway, during the confrontation on Tuesday, Shelby goes back and forth with James Birch, policy director for the Anti-Police Terror Project. I'm anti that. And one of several activists who filmed the officer. Are we having a dance party? Birch asks Shelby after he turns on the tune in the middle of their conversation. And the officer answers him, you can record all you want. It's good he didn't try to stop him from recording. Still a lot of cops still doing that. You can record all you want. I just know it can't be posted on YouTube, Shelby responds, referring to the social media giant's automated system that detects copyrighted material and removes it from the platform. Despite Shelby's efforts, the video shared by the Anti-Police Terror Project, an organization that seeks to hold officers accountable, gained more than 174,000 views on YouTube, I guess it was there, and had more than 769,000 views on Twitter on Friday afternoon. A cop demanded we move the banner, I guess it was, the banner read, hashtag Justice for Stephen Taylor. On the banner, he asked that demanded that they move it. We asked him why. He pulled out his phone and played a Taylor Swift song. The Anti-Police Terror Project wrote in a caption of the video, the Alameda County Sheriff's Office acknowledged that Shelby's actions did not have his desired effect. According to the Washington Post, I guess that's where the story actually comes from, the officer was trying to be a little smart, and it kind of backfired. Do you think? Sergeant Ray Kelly, a sheriff's office spokesman, told the Post, instead of censoring it, it made it go viral. In that sense, yes, but I don't think he was looking to censor it, per se. Kelly told the news outlet that Shelby is still on duty, but the incident is being investigated. I don't think he needs to be suspended for that. He also added that while there isn't a set policy banning the officer's actions, the sheriff's office did not condone his behavior. This is not a good look for law enforcement, he said. There is a serious lesson learned here. So I don't know. I'm curious what you might think about that. It was an interesting story to me. Like, I thought, just so long as you're not trying to cover up and prevent the dissemination of real serious news, if you are obviously going above and beyond your authority and either using excessive force or being otherwise outrageous and rude or just outright aggressive and attacking people, I don't think you should be able to count on that to keep you off of YouTube. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if a story that started out as a local story rose to national prominence over an issue like this, particularly if there was, serious evidence of a real crime being committed by the police on this videotape. And I would think that probably the performer in control of the copyright might, in fact, waive any claims in that instance if there was some, real evidence of serious wrongdoing, and then it was important that the public see it. That's where I think things might really backfire. Here, though, while it was probably his intention to prevent the video from being posted on YouTube, and I guess in that sense it actually backfired, I could see it, I guess, from the police perspective, in the sense of, like, if your plan going into it is, well, this is going to be unpleasant for the people I'm interacting with, but it's not going to be dangerous. I'm fully aware of what the situation is, and thinking ahead of time about how to not let it get out of control. Like, we really want that from police, certainly. But on the other hand, you could see yourself being videotaped by people intent on getting into a confrontation with you. And I have no reason to believe that this particular group or this particular person had that intent, but I think that probably cops worry about that, and they would worry more about the possibility, much more likely than getting into a real serious confrontation and getting in trouble for that. Much more likely would be being filmed by somebody who was out for confrontation and looking to put up a video critical of police and not really getting what they were after, but hyping it anyway. And so you find yourself on YouTube not doing anything really wrong, but just becoming the target for a lot of anger anyway. And so if you can sort of prevent that by something relatively harmless, playing a Taylor Swift song, I don't know that that's such a bad idea. Of course, I don't want that to go viral in the sense of spreading to other police who then think that they can use that to cover up crime. So in that sense, it hasn't backfired. It won't keep you off YouTube with any great regularity. And this first test that I'm aware of, they're 0 for 1 on that. But I'm wondering about just sort of generally how that will come into play, or if that'll come into play in the future, or whether, I guess the Alameda County Sheriff's Office might instruct its officers not to do that, and that'll be the end of it. But curious situation here. Meanwhile, I guess other cops who aren't listening to the authorities when it comes to the restrictions on them. The Washington Post piece here, just thought I'd at least give you the headline for this one, even if not running through the whole thing. A former police officer arrested after the January 6th riot was told, I guess by the courts, stay away from guns. It's a little difficult for the police officers to stay away from guns, but they probably were warning him in his personal capacity. Now that you've been arrested in this violent insurrection, maybe your big hobby of collecting a whole bunch of guns should be set aside for the time being, just for your own well-being and maybe help you get through this case in court. His apparently immediate response, buying 34 more guns. So that seems like a bad response. That's the story here in the Washington Post. Andrea Salcedo reporting this end of last week, July 2nd. In January, a federal judge agreed to release Thomas Robertson, a former Rocky Mount, Virginia police officer facing multiple charges over his alleged participation in the January 6th Capitol riot. I don't know if he was a former officer by the time the riot came about, or whether he became a former police officer after it was discovered that he had participated. But I guess it wouldn't be so difficult for him to stay away from guns after all if he's no longer a police officer. But anyway, Judge G. Michael Harvey's release conditions were clear. Robertson could not own any firearms, destructive devices, or dangerous weapons while his case was pending. If he owned any guns, he must relocate them within 2 days. Days after his release, authorities found 8 firearms at his home in Ferrum, Virginia, according to court documents. The judge gave Robertson a second chance, reminding him of his release conditions. Then, last month, I guess during his second chance, authorities found a loaded M4 carbine and a partially assembled pipe bomb, which really there's pretty much no excuse for having around the house. While conducting an authorized search at his home, court records state, Robertson is also accused of buying 34 firearms online and transporting them in interstate commerce while under felony indictment, prosecutors said. Now they are asking the judge to revoke Robertson's release order. That sounds reasonable. And issue an arrest warrant for violating his pretrial release terms a second time. Because the defendant has shown an utter disregard for the court's orders prohibiting his possession of firearms and other weapons, like bombs, during the time that he's been on pretrial release, and because he has further flouted his release conditions through repeated violations of the federal firearms laws, the defendant presents a danger to the community that no release conditions will adequately mitigate. Yeah, I would say so. Well, that was filed, I guess, last week on Wednesday. Probably no immediate answer here, but perhaps today when the courts reopen, or shortly thereafter, we may get an answer on that. Does it say? I'll skim and see whether there's any information about when he will likely be able to expect an answer from the judge. Well, this is interesting. Robertson not due back in court until August 3rd. So who knows what he's doing and how many guns he's buying between then and now. I think maybe they ought to act a little more swiftly than that. The rest of the article, a very interesting recounting of his participation and January 6th and the details of his arrest and finding all the rest of the guns and bombs, for God's sake, in the time in between. All right. Speaking of all of this insurrection materials and Congress in general, I stumbled upon something very interesting the other day as well. I guess this has much more to do with the regular conduct of business on Capitol Hill as opposed to the insurrection on Capitol Hill, but happened to see the tweet last week, of Annie Grayer, who had this interesting angle on things. She tweeted, 9 Republican members of the House were with Trump at the border when he made his latest weird trip to the border not that long ago. At any rate, 9 Republican members of the House were with him. I recall seeing photos of Lauren Boebert being there, among others. But let's see. They were at the border with Trump, but they still had their votes counted during votes on Capitol Hill that day because they cast proxy votes, which they're permitted to do under the still existing COVID-19 protocols, allowing for people to cast proxy votes so they don't have to actually be among the crowd on Capitol Hill each day in person. But what's interesting about this is, of course, that this is because of, COVID and medical issues. Proxy voting for many years was banned. It used to be a more common practice, but in the last 20 years or so, they just basically got rid of it. But now, with COVID-19, they allow doing it. But proxy voting requires that members sign a letter, and I think they have to address them to the speaker, but you have to sign a letter citing the pandemic as the reason that they missed the vote. So here they were at an event with Trump, which is not a great way to avoid the pandemic, by the way, at the border, not at home isolating in order to stay healthy, but out and about at public events, but just spending their time as members of Congress doing publicity stunts at the border instead of being on hand to vote, but then still voting by proxy. So Annie Grayer who's with CNN, began digging for some data. I'll read you her tweets, and then maybe we'll go through her. Maybe it's better to go through her written piece instead. She's got the piece up at CNN. Republican trip to the border highlights how proxy voting has changed Congress. And, kind of interesting. I'm not sure whether the best way to do this is to go through her tweet thread. How many entries has she got in her tweet thread here? Versus reading the actual article. Well, let's see. I'll read you the summary by going through the tweets. Sometimes that calls out the best parts, and then we'll read the thing more thoroughly. Even though GOP leadership is against proxy voting, 37% of Republicans have bucked their party's stance and used it at least once, which is actually good news. I think it was a smart move given the pandemic. Members of the GOP even filed a lawsuit against proxy voting. Did you know that? But 40 of the initial plaintiffs have voted via proxy. So that's not great for their claims. A total of 734 collective votes among them. Dems use proxy voting even more. 73% of Democrats have tried it. 5 Democrats have voted solely by proxy since January. They are Representatives Al Lawson, Frederica Wilson, Grace Napolitano, Ted Lieu, I had no idea he had done that this whole time, and Alan Lowenthal. A 6th, Donald Payne, voted by proxy for every vote except one. Most cite health reasons for why they use it. So, what does all this mean? By extending proxy voting, Dems hold on to their slim majority regardless of whether all their members are on Capitol Hill. So actually quite important for them. Republicans have started to use it more despite their party's objections because it's the only way to challenge Democrats on close votes. Neither side wants to renounce proxy voting because with only a slim majority, Democrats aren't going to do it, and Republicans don't want to miss out on any chance that they might actually have if people forget to file their votes by proxy or other people who aren't voting by proxy are somehow absent that day, just at random. There's the possibility that Republicans might win a vote. So, let's see. Some members like proxy voting because it allows their schedules to be more flexible, even though that's not what the practice was created for. It has raised questions, though, about whether there's room for Congress to implement some element of remote voting going forward. Has proxy voting been abused? Steny Hoyer, House Majority Leader, says, and the architect of the modern practice, the current practice of proxy voting, says, well, I think you're right on that. The Maryland Democrat told CNN when presented with examples of how members have misused the practice, quote, on both sides. So, unfortunately, that enters into the equation. It's also, though, changed, she says, the culture of the House. Pressure that an impending recess puts on getting a deal done. Very familiar, right? Pressure that an impending recess puts on getting a deal done decreases significantly if members are casting their votes from home. That is pretty interesting. And then the deep dive, the article that I mentioned to you is attached here, along with Kristen Wilson and Sarah Fortinsky. Annie Grayer has put this longer piece together. Again, the title, Republican Trip to the Border Highlights How Proxy Voting Has Changed Congress. Representative Madison Cawthorn, of course he would make an appearance in this. Madison Cawthorn once opposed the special COVID-era rule that lets House members vote even when they're away from the House, calling it, calling it for, quote, cowards. Really, I think it was probably calling it, quote, for cowards, but I don't know. Well, anyway, but on Wednesday, I guess of last week, the North Carolina Republican made flagrant and unabashed use of it by traveling to the border wall for a political event with former President Donald Trump. He wasn't alone in doing so. 8 other House Republicans also managed to appear alongside Trump at the border while simultaneously casting critical votes back in Washington. All they had to do was sign a letter to the House clerk, I guess that's where it goes, very good, thank you, saying that they were, quote, unable to physically attend proceedings in the House chamber due to the ongoing public health emergency. Well, that sounds like a lie, doesn't it? It's the latest example of lawmakers using a tool meant to ease health concerns for expressly political means in what appears to be a clear violation of the rule. However, there's little desire from either side of the aisle to punish members for violations. Democrats see proxy voting as a way to ensure they keep their slim majority regardless of whether all their members are on Capitol Hill, and Republicans have started to use it more despite their objections. Democrats have made even more liberal use of the tool, which started off in 2020 as a way to protect members from the pandemic, but now enables lawmakers to enjoy the benefits of working remotely, much like other white-collar American workers. In May, 7 House Democrats joined President Joe Biden when he went to Michigan. Just Tuesday, Democratic Representative Ron Kind voted proxy the same day he greeted Biden in Wisconsin, having taken the time away to discuss directly with the president ways we can increase vaccination rates in Wisconsin, he said in a statement, which is, I guess, a little bit ironic given that, I guess, he's probably himself vaccinated. And I guess once you're vaccinated, there's not much health excuse left for voting entirely by proxy and not showing up. But of course, we know that there are probably people, probably members of Congress among them, who just can't get vaccinated for some other medical reason. But Republicans, she continues, are the ones who, as a group, loudly criticized proxy voting, even filing a lawsuit to challenge its constitutionality. 40 of those original Republican plaintiffs have used proxy voting at least once, according to a comprehensive analysis conducted by CNN. We are against proxy voting and we will eliminate it on day one of our majority. But if Democrats are going to continue to extend and abuse this tool solely to protect their slim margins, it would be stupid of us not to participate until we can eliminate it, a Republican leadership aide told CNN. I mean, I understand the sentiment, but if you are, in fact, signing letters that say you're skipping the session because of health reasons, does your signature just mean nothing at all, or what? I mean, probably time to crack down on this. Even House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, the architect of the proxy voting system, conceded to CNN on Tuesday that members on both sides of the aisle were not using the system the way it was initially intended. I think you're right on that. Even so, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Monday extended proxy voting for an additional 45 days, as it had been set to expire on July 3rd. In a comprehensive accounting of 185 roll call votes from the time an extension of proxy voting went into effect on January 12th until Tuesday of last week, CNN found that 5 Democratic members have voted solely by proxy in that time. We named them before. Donald Payne, of course, the one who voted once in person, but otherwise by proxy. The one vote cast in person, the vote to impeach Trump, in case you were wondering. Democrats currently have a 4-vote majority in the House, and 73% of Democrats have utilized proxy voting over the period CNN examined. A House Democratic leadership aide defended extending the proxy voting period and why certain members have consistently used the practice. The federal government is still in a state of emergency. The CDC still has a public health emergency declared, the aide said. No one can receive the vaccine under the age of 12, so that impacts a large number of members who have young children. Also, there are a number of people who, during a pandemic, the child care is still a challenge. So those are 4 things keeping this going. I don't know how much trouble they're having getting child care, but there certainly could be other medical reasons. The aide added, I'm not excusing anybody who's doing it inappropriately. I'm saying the vast majority of this, the overwhelming use of proxy voting, has been completely legitimate and in line with the purposes it was intended for. Although Democrats far surpass Republicans' use of proxy voting, 37% of Republicans have bucked their party's stance against the voting tool and used it at least once. Of the initial 130 Republicans to serve as plaintiffs in the lawsuit, 40 have voted via proxy, a total of 734 collective votes among them. I think we got those facts out from the tweets. Since that lawsuit was filed, more and more Republicans have dropped off as named plaintiffs. That's good. At least they're doing that. With just 21 remaining on the case. Of those 21, 3 have still selectively used proxy voting. Mark Green of Tennessee, Tom Cole of Oklahoma, and Kay Granger of Texas, who used it as recently as June 17th. CNN has reached out to all 3 members for comment, but they only gave proxy statements. In a statement, Cole said, "Even when I fundamentally disagree with the rules of the House, there is nothing inconsistent with following those rules as they currently exist while actively working to change them." Republican Representative Don Bacon, no idea, of Nebraska, made the case to CNN that while he is against proxy voting, his party's public opposition to the practice hurts its chances of challenging the Democratic majority, especially when a given vote is close. "I oppose proxy voting in principle and have not voted by proxy to date, but when Democrats can do it and we ask our conference not to, it puts us at a disadvantage on close votes," he told CNN. No, that's true. It does. But then again, you mostly expect to lose those votes anyway. And, principle is principle. If you've got it, act on it. Sometimes it'll cost you. I mean, that's kind of the way it is with principles. Otherwise, it's just doing the thing that advantages you the most, which is what you ended up doing. And so it turns out that your real principle is doing things that advantage you the most. That's okay. I can accept that, and we all knew that it was the case about the Republicans. Anyway, yes, the article continues on. We are running up against our top of the hour break here. But, I should skim this a little bit more. It's actually quite interesting, and given that we're going to be talking to Joan, because she's actually quite good at remembering all this stuff, I'm reminded during the break of how often I worry about this, and really it's just my own projection. She just doesn't miss. I just keep worrying about these things because I'm looking for things to talk about. So probably owe her an apology when she gets on the air here. She's been very tolerant of my continuing to say, well, gee whiz, I don't know if she's going to make it. Well, of course she's going to make it. I think it happened like once, maybe twice. I've got to get off the subject. Anyway, when we come back, a little bit more about this because it's kind of interesting. Material from behind the scenes and the way Congress works. That's kind of what the show is about. It's not always the most scintillating, but always informative. I hope. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I want to just continue, I think, with this, to me, still fascinating article about the weird impact and weird relationship that proxy voting plays or has, or the members have with proxy voting. I'm sure they do find it convenient, and, maybe it's not all that bad a thing to continue, even if it really is only ends up being used to give members more flexible schedules. Although I'm interested in the loss of leverage that they noted, or that she noted in her tweet thread about this thing, loss of leverage that comes with the necessity of breaking for recesses. So we'll get around to that one here. Of the members who utilized proxy voting the most and who got back to CNN, most cited health reasons and the fact that not all members of Congress are vaccinated as why they continue to use the practice. Patrick Wright, Donald Payne's communications director, said the congressman is diabetic and intends to continue to vote via proxy until more members of Congress are vaccinated. The congressman has employed proxy voting simply because of the fact that it's just better for his health and the health of his colleagues, Wright told CNN. Until everyone in Congress understands the power of the vaccine and the importance of it to getting things back to normal, the congressman is going to have to continue his vote proxy for his own health and safety of his colleagues. Payne returned to Congress on Wednesday for the first time in months to participate in a news conference addressing an upcoming bill on infrastructure. The speaker asked me to be here, and when the speaker calls you, you tend to answer, Payne told CNN. He nonetheless voted by proxy during the afternoon. Lowenthal, whose spokesperson shared with CNN that the congressman has been utilizing proxy voting for all of his votes, because of guidance from the House and his personal physician, told CNN that he believes the proxy voting system has worked well. Lowenthal shared that he looks forward to returning to Washington. I think that during this national emergency, the proxy voting system has worked amazingly well and has served a critical role in allowing Congress and the government to keep functioning, Lowenthal said in a statement. I have not personally seen anyone misusing the proxy voting process. An aide for Napolitano, who lost a member of her staff due to COVID and has voted proxy ever since, for every vote since CNN started its tally, said the Congresswoman has been voting via proxy to protect her health, but is considering returning to Congress. I wowould say the Congresswoman in our entire office has just taken the pandemic very, very seriously. Jerry O'Donnell, Napolitano's deputy chief of staff, told CNN, it's really in consultation with the attending physician and her health history and limiting her movement during the worst months of the pandemic. She is hoping to be back in Washington during the next session, probably in July, O'Donnell added. Oh, that kind of session, not next year, but just the informal use of the term session. Republicans remain skeptical of those health concerns, though. For those members who are using that excuse, who's saying here, House Republican leadership aide now speaking here, for those members who are using that excuse, are we tracking them to see that they are only staying inside their house and never going anywhere? Do they ever go to a restaurant? Do they ever go to a mall? Do they ever go to a store? He's very suspicious. And I mean, that's how you would track it down. But of course, you should probably keep in mind there are Republican members who are appearing on television with Trump at border events who have just signed letters, again, it's under their signature. It's a fairly serious thing, to the House clerk saying the opposite, that they're staying home because of health concerns. So I don't know if that guy knew that when he was giving that comment. Anyway, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry said he views Democrats' desire to hold on to proxy voting as a way to cushion their majority. I think at this point it's being held on to for political purposes rather than for health purposes, and I think that's a real challenge, the North Carolinian told CNN. I mean, there's something to that, I suppose, but if it wasn't for the health problem, I think it fairly reasonable to expect that those members would in fact be there and they'd be holding on to their majority. So I don't know how, what there really is to prove here. I guess if there was no reason to think that there was a health risk, then they'd be there and they'd be holding on to that majority. And I don't know that it makes a great deal of difference. Let's see. Other lawmakers admit that they're using the proxy voting system simply because they don't want to be in the nation's capital right now. Florida's Vern Buchanan, the Republican who has used proxy voting the most, according to CNN analysis, told CNN that he believes proxy voting should end after Labor Day. While it's in place, he chose to buck his party and use the voting method repeatedly because he felt like he could be more productive working from his district. Not totally unreasonable, right? I can be a lot more productive back home. There's nobody up here. Oh, I see, up in D.C. So I just felt like I'd have a bigger impact in my district back in Sarasota, Buchanan told CNN. Nobody else was here. Nobody in my office was here. I sit by myself, Buchanan added. Nobody can come in and visit with you. We can be more productive visiting with people, having meetings back home, not spending a half a day at the beach each way coming up here. What? Oh, I see. I don't know why. Where did that come from? I thought he was talking about he's saying, I'm not spending my days at the beach. I'm spending my days having meetings. But he's saying we can be more productive here, not spending half a day each, get it? Each, not beach, but each way coming up here, flying up here, and there's nobody here. Okay, so the time spent on airplanes, I guess, is what he's complaining about. Democratic Representative Katie Porter, who represents Orange County, California, and cited public health guidelines for why she voted via proxy 137 times, told CNN that her constituents do not care whether she casts or where she casts her votes from, as long as she gets her work done. That's entirely possible, too. My constituents just want me to work really hard. They don't care where I work. We don't have to do things the way we've done them since the time of sand. Since the time of sand. Anyone familiar with that phrase? Anyway, that's what Porter told CNN last week. I guess that's a long time ago. I don't know. The time of sand. Other lawmakers have used proxy voting systems for openly political purposes. In April, Democratic Representatives Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Joyce Beatty of Ohio, and Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas were all seen in Minnesota, at least Ilhan Omar is from Minnesota, participating in protests around the Derek Chauvin murder trial. Does he say Chauvin? I don't even know how he pronounces it. I guess I should be proud of not having paid enough attention to him, but only to his trial. Anyway, they still used proxy voting to cast their votes as the House was in session. Democratic Representative Dan Kildee, one of the members of the Michigan delegation to use proxy voting to join Joe Biden in the state in May, defended his decision to use proxy voting that day in a statement to CNN, saying, "Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, members of Michigan's congressional delegation were unable to travel on Air Force One with the president to Dearborn. As a result, members had to take a commercial flight hours after the presidential visit ended that required them to vote by proxy," Kildee said in a statement. Interesting, okay. Hoyer said of the 6 Democrats who used proxy voting the most, if we did not have proxy voting, they'd all be here, conceding that without the option, members would have to come to Congress rather than miss votes. Now, about how it changes the way Congress works. With as many as 70 members not voting in person on any given day, the practice of proxy voting has changed the dynamics of Capitol Hill. The need to stick to a rigid schedule and the pressure that an impending recess puts on getting a deal done decreases significantly if members are casting their votes from home. Smelling jet fumes used to be a thing. That's how you got a deal, a separate Republican leadership aide told CNN. That doesn't really exist anymore. McHenry made the case that proxy voting needs to end so members can get back to working directly with each other. I think, frankly, as an institution, we should get back to dealing with each other, talking to each other, and trying to understand each other so we can actually do the work of the American people. We're not doing that right now, McHenry said. People aren't here, and we're a one-on-one institution. We're a human interaction place, both with members and with the press. And there's really something to that, I think. I don't really know that, he's actually working with anybody, but generally speaking, it's something of interest. I'll say that much anyway. Hoyer believes proxy voting has spurred a conversation about how Congress can modernize and incorporate elements of remote voting in the future. When people vote for me to represent their view, they don't vote for me to represent it here or there, he said, referring to the various voting stations in the House chamber. You don't have to stand in some place. They don't care about that. They care about how I express their viewpoint, Hoyer added. I think we're going to have a discussion about that. And that's definitely true. I mean, I don't think people really care whether they're there for voting per se, although it probably makes a difference to them when they say they care about how I express my views in Congress. If you're not present, it's difficult, maybe impossible, to claim floor time, for instance, and to be seen on C-SPAN making a speech. Although, I mean, I think they actually have rigged that up, especially in the early days when almost everybody was proxy voting. But I'm not sure. I haven't really watched enough floor proceedings to take note of that. Certainly not lately. But, that makes a big difference when you see your member of Congress on the floor of the House making a point versus reading that they cast their vote and never seeing them speak up on these issues on C-SPAN or elsewhere. So, very interesting and worth some consideration, certainly. And because it went on to describe how the dynamics of the House were affected by adopting this proxy voting procedure. Well worth considering, and trying to decide how to go forward with this thing. And there's definitely, even absent the pandemic, there was a lot of people asking for the possibility of enabling remote voting for some of the reasons that Vern Buchanan actually gave, that people actually appreciate having their member of Congress, one, able to cast their vote and express their viewpoint that way, but at the same time be available to constituents back at home far more frequently. Certainly something to consider in the future. All right, let's see. A couple of other items that came up over the weekend. Probably a good idea to take a quick look back at the Twitter feed from the weekend for picking out some of those items that happened over the weekend. Here's something just quick and easy hit, just to, I guess, anticipate the next outrage from Republicans. It's not a serious issue, but that doesn't mean anything with Republicans. It doesn't matter whether it's serious or not. But I see that The Hill, I think, really baiting Republicans with this one, reports that Disney World has removed the phrase "ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls" from its fireworks announcement. It does sound rather familiar, and I think it's a phrase used elsewhere, right? Just sort of a general address to the entirety of the crowd. But I remember hearing that at Disney World as they're doing their nightly fireworks show. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, blah, 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 whatever the hell. I don't know what they say after that. But guess what? Of course, I think this is meant to bait Republicans into screaming that this is, woke culture and I don't know how somehow this is going to undermine the foundation of America, that they've found some other phrase to use. If you're curious about what phrase it is that they use, I retweeted this thing with, some satirical remarks alongside it, but people were like, oh, well, what do they say? Just, yo, them/they? What kind of pronouns do they decide are appropriate to use? Well, it's not that hard to write another line. As it happens, Disney has removed the phrase "ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls" from a greeting announcing its widely recognized Magic Kingdom fireworks show. The change, they say, is part of a broader effort. A Disney spokesperson told CBS News it's not about one or two things. They don't want it to become a culture war issue. But instead, they say, "Good evening, dreamers of all ages." That's perfectly fine and totally in keeping with the Disney ethos, whatever that might be. Good evening, dreamers of all ages. We're going to have our freaking fireworks now, so STFU, sit down and let us do the show. They don't actually say the rest of that stuff, but perfectly adequate, I think, and perfectly Disney in its approach. However, this will, of course, be, they'll fan the flames, Republicans will, into this being, part of a culture war, and how dare they, and America can't function unless you say the words "ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls." But anyway, that's out there, just trying to anticipate the next outrage and see if we can correctly guess it before it happens, and then we can pat ourselves on the back and cry over how ridiculous our country has become. But, okay, there you have it. That's out there. Let's see. Other very interesting developments from over the weekend. I have yet to sit through the very favorably reviewed work from, was it the New York Times, putting together a video presentation of their, I guess, compilation of January 6th footage and reporting that is apparently one of the more definitive looks at the events on the Hill that day and the impact that they have, that they've had. But lots of people discussing this thing, and interested in making sure that we see the rest of it. So there's no way for me to like play it for you or even discuss it in that sense. But instead, perhaps I set the table with for that subject by taking a look at a piece in Salon from Chauncey De Vega, as a matter of fact, who you may be following along with on Twitter as well. The headline of the piece here: how close did Trump come to attempting a military coup, whether on 1/6 alone or in all the days surrounding it? Much too close is the answer he gives himself in the headline. Trump's erratic behavior undermined his desire to seize power. Those who come next won't make the same mistakes. A lot of common sentiment in that header and subheader here. The piece illustrated by pictures of lunatics, Sidney Powell, Donald Trump, allegedly formerly the President of the United States, and notorious international spy Mike Flynn. Let's get a flavor for this in our remaining minutes in this third segment. At the present moment, American democracy is like a tightrope walker attempting a crossing during a howling storm and without a net. That democracy has thus far survived, and that's in scare quotes, the age of Trump and his regime's and allies' assaults, including an all-too-real attempted coup, is something like the luck enjoyed by fools and drunks. Joe Biden may now be president, but the perilous tightrope walk continues. Safety appears to be in sight, but that is a dangerous illusion. Most lethal falls during a tightrope walk, I don't know if that's really necessarily the analogy we need to use for this, but all right. Most lethal falls during a tightrope walk happen during the last few feet when the performer believes they are safe. Okay, I'm not certain, again, how much value that has, but anyway, the flood of revelations about the Trump regime's attempts to overthrow American democracy continue. Contrary to what the professional smart people with their view from nowhere and too many other members of the chattering classes have claimed, the dangers of a coup perpetrated by the Trump regime were not exaggerated or hysterical, and most certainly were not symptoms of Trump derangement syndrome. The danger was clear and obvious for those who were paying attention to reality as it is, and not as others wished it to be. What do we now know, and should have known already? Trump and members of his inner circle wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act in response to last summer's protests that followed the police murder of George Floyd. As reported by CNN, Trump longed for the U.S. military to, quote, crack skulls and handle the protesters with great force. He reportedly wanted the United States military to beat the, all we can say is F, out of the protesters and even shoot them. When told that such violence was illegal and inappropriate, Trump then suggested that the military could shoot protesters in the legs instead. This, of course, all drawn from earlier reporting that I had set aside, and I don't think we actually read all the way through, though we noted it in passing. But, yeah, we probably would have done well to have squeezed that in at the time. But, yes, reports of discussions in the Oval Office during the protests last summer, this all part of the larger Lafayette Square protest story and the lawsuits surrounding those protests that we have been discussing on the show in the last couple of weeks. But just generally, it wasn't something that he only wanted to do with the protesters at Lafayette Square Park, but rather all around the country. And rather disconcerting to have learned this. This, of course, pointing to CNN's reporting about it from, a few weeks ago here. Let's see if we can pull that one up. This under the headline of Top U.S. General Rejected Trump's Suggestions Military Should Crack Skulls During Protest Last Year. New book claims. That was one of the excerpts from the book. I think we mentioned and read a little bit from the Washington Post excerpting from those books. Anyway, it appears that General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then Defense Secretary Mark Esper were able to stop Trump from ordering U.S. troops to act out his violent, psychopathic fantasies. ProPublica recently obtained emails revealing that the violence by Trump's followers on January 6th was predictable and in no sense unexpected. In their new reporting, Joshua Kaplan and Joaquin Sapien explain that they interviewed more than 50 people involved in the events of January 6th and reviewed months' worth of private correspondence. And they say in their piece, taken together, these accounts suggest that senior Trump aides had been warned the January 6th events could turn chaotic, with tens of thousands of people potentially overwhelming ill-prepared law enforcement officials. Rather than trying to halt the march, Trump and his allies accommodated its leaders, according to text messages and interviews with Republican operatives and officials. In other words, nothing about the coup attempt was spontaneous or random. It was part of a much larger plot and conspiracy previewed by Trump's repeated attempts to invoke the Insurrection Act during the George Floyd protests and other moments of his presidency. In addition, many questions remain unanswered about the Trump regime's embedding of its supporters in key national security positions and the military's delayed response to the Capitol attack. Let's not overlook that Trump did in fact want the National Guard deployed on January 6th, but remember why. It was to protect his followers as they gathered earlier in the day before marching on the U.S. Capitol. He wanted the the D.C. National Guard there, but he wanted them there to protect the insurrectionists. From who? I don't know. I guess the cops that would otherwise have stopped them from entering the Capitol. By the way, that reminds me that something circulating this morning, speaking of the idea, anyway, that much of this was pre-planned, this morning circulating is the tweet from Scott McFarlane noting that 6 months ago this morning, Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama was giving his "Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass" speech at the Ellipse on January 6th. But the new twist here is that per a new civil case filing, Brooks says he only gave the speech because the White House asked him to do so. That he now claims that he would otherwise never have been at the rally on the Ellipse, but for a request from the White House that Mo Brooks, of all people, show up at the Ellipse and give a speech. Whether they wrote that speech for him or not, I guess, is still an open question. But an interesting twist to the events here. Now back to Chauncey DeVega's piece here. After having reminded us that Trump wanted the D.C. National Guard deployed, but on behalf of the insurgents, as I like to call them, just to draw the parallel to the situation in Iraq from all those years ago. Anyway, moreover, in a December 2020 Oval Office meeting with Donald Trump and other members of his inner circle, the disgraced former general and national security advisor Michael Flynn supposedly even went so far as to suggest that Trump should impose martial law in order to remain in power following his defeat by Joe Biden. When viewed in the context of the Trump regime's and Republican Party's broader campaign against American democracy, it appears obvious, except to the most self-deluded observers, that using the Insurrection Act would have provided an avenue for Donald Trump to remain in power past the end of his constitutional term and perhaps indefinitely. In that unimaginable scenario, the military would have been used as an occupying force against the American people, or more specifically against people in the largest metropolitan areas where supporters of the Democratic Party are concentrated. A state of national emergency would have been declared and the 2020 elections postponed or canceled. Would the military have obeyed Trump's orders? There is no way to know. It's possible it might have fractured into competing factions, as would the public at large. The result could well have been widespread disorder and violence, even a second American Civil War, which, of course, we know that at least some segment of the Republican supporters of Donald Trump actually want, or say they want anyway. In a new essay at the Washington Monthly, Daniel Block outlines one such scenario. Let's see how much of it we can get in before our break. All of this raises a serious question. Could the United States experience prolonged acute civil violence? According to dozens of interviews with former and current government officials, counterterrorism researchers, and political scientists who study both the U.S. and other countries, the answer is yes. I think that the conditions are pretty clearly headed in that direction, says Katrina Mulligan, Managing Director for National Security and International Policy at the Center for American Progress, and a former Director for Preparedness and Response in the National Security Division at the Department of Justice. The insurrection on January 6th was a canary in the coal mine, in a way, precisely because it wasn't a surprise to those of us who have been following this. Well, a lot of people feel the same way, and apparently you're not alone just sitting at home. Actual experts feel this way too. We'll be back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us. I don't know why I ever worry about Joan McCarter making it here, by the way. I don't know. I think that's just me.
A few times.
Yeah. It's happened, but, I don't know. I think that's just me. Like, I just fret in the morning because there's nothing else to do, and I'm not sure which direction to take here. But I don't know. Maybe I make it sound like it's worse than it is. But anyway, you're here now, and that's what counts. That's good news. Although, I was chatting with you during the break. Still 100+ degrees there?
Yes.
Ugh.
Yes. Today's supposed to be the hottest so far. Oh, wow. It's going to be 106, they say.
Ugh.
It'll be the 9th triple-digit day in a row.
Wow.
Matching a record set in 2015, but we've got at least another 2 days above 100. Then we're supposed to drop to 96.
Oh, relief.
Then to 99, and then back up above 100. So.
Oh. Well, I don't know what's causing that exactly. I mean, in terms of having it hover there for so long.
It's parked. Wow. It is just parked.
And
stretching now from inland California all the way up. I don't know how far into Canada it goes.
Wow. Well, I mean...
so far, about 8,000 deaths have been attributed to it in Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and I don't know.
Did you say 1,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
719 as of the end of last week in British Columbia.
Wow. That's...
And a couple hundred Washington, Oregon. And this is from like 5 days ago, so I don't know how many now.
Wow.
And undoubtedly some in the inland Northwest,
I guess
too.
So.
We've got air conditioning here, at least, because we are used to it more than the coast. But
okay, yeah,
it's still pretty oppressive.
I would say so. Yeah,
there are a lot of we've got the firefighters who are fighting more fires because of course, the 4th of July and drought, persistent drought. This is the earliest that irrigation water has been turned off to farmers in a good chunk of the state of Idaho.
I mean, it happens from time to time, but
there.
Yeah.
So we're going to roast and then we're going to burn.
It's just Hey, happy 4th of July. Yeah, you just came out of a pandemic.
So I wake up to Byron York bitching about how climate activists are going to derail the infrastructure package.
Yeah. Ugh. I mean, I know I've seen that, and I guess another attempt at Republican outrage was that Democrats and woke culture are going to ban fireworks for the 4th of July. And, of course, that's, I think, an outgrowth of the fact that you're talking about places that haven't had rain in weeks and are under forest fire watch anyway. And then it's 100 and something degrees, and they're like, let's go out and light things on fire and send rockets flying all over the place and sparks raining on all of this. It's not, we don't like 4th of July. It's maybe you want to watch out for setting yourself on fire.
Just perhaps.
Yeah. You had fireworks in the area, though?
We had fireworks in the area,
Okay.
not as
Just
many this
professional.
year. The illegal fireworks,
Okay.
not as many this year as we've had in the past. So at least some people listened. But
Yeah.
I think
Well, it's too hot
Boise
to be out
Fire responded to, I think, 24
Mm.
fires
Okay.
overnight on on Sunday into Monday. But yeah, the
okay.
illegal stuff in Idaho being Idaho,
Yeah. Is anything
illegal
illegal?
fireworks are not really illegal. You can
There
sell
you go.
illegal fireworks in the state of Idaho. But
Ah.
when you buy them, you have to sign a paper saying, I promise not to set them off.
Oh. So just for fireworks collectors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that works.
Like gun collectors, right. Yeah. I promise not to
My
shoot
state
them. I'm just going to look at
is
them.
Not rational, Kagro.
I guess not, but, maybe that's a smaller number than usual. I guess if it's 100 degrees, you just don't want to be outside lighting
That
them
was part
anyway.
of it. Yeah.
But-
Yeah, it's just been oppressively hot. And every day that passes that's this hot, even if you are inside in air conditioning, is still oppressive. It's still really awful.
Yeah.
Really awful.
Just another thing keeping you inside all the time. If it's not a pandemic, it's a heat wave.
And we're looking at this, the
Fire
10-day
raining from the
forecast.
sky.
We've got those 2 days under 100, and then the rest is over 100. We're moving into, from mid-June to September, is just going to be 100 degrees, because that's just,
Wow.
we're moving into the time in Boise where it normally in southern Idaho where it does bump up against triple digits.
Sometimes.
So,
And- Okay.
pretty soon we can call it normal.
Great. And the Idaho desert as well
Yeah.
becomes a normality. All right.
Well, it is actually high desert.
Well, yeah. Now it just spreads
That's
everywhere.
part of it. And now it's just desert.
Right. Just, yeah, right. It's high desert and just regular Sahara type desert as well. And fry the potatoes directly in the ground. And just ship
Hey,
them
there's a thought.
as naturally occurring French fries. That's all.
If they can grow without water.
Yeah. Oh, that's a problem. But all right. Well, at least so far safe there. Also, by the way, I note so far a decrease in the number of immediate reports anyway of injuries from celebratory gunfire. It's also too hot to go outside and fire your guns in the air in a lot of the country.
Yeah, it wasn't celebratory. Apparently, all of the
No,
gunshots.
not all.
It was
Just the
people
accidental
actually shooting
ones.
each other.
That
on
happens
purpose.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't even
But
bother
a
with that
lot
anymore.
of it over the weekend.
Yeah, well, heat makes people irritable as well, and there's a number of other complicating factors all the time anyhow, not the least of which is, of course, like illegal fireworks. Everybody just buy them, just don't use them. Guns
Right.
now available, by the millions, and by mail order and off the rack, and no longer at Walmart, thankfully, but just generally speaking, in widespread circulation. And no matter how hard we try, people just can't be convinced to only collect them and not set them off like the fireworks. So, the accidents, the nature of the accidents may be changing. It may just be this particular weekend, or it may be just that the news cycle hasn't caught up. A lot of this stuff happens later on. It takes a couple of days to filter through all the stories of people who've had bullets come through their roofs it takes about a week to find those.
We do know CNN reported, and Mark Sumner has written it up for the front page, that there were over 400 shootings over the holiday weekend and at least 150 fatalities. I mean, that was intentional shooting, not celebratory shooting.
Right. Which, I think is, well, obviously the ongoing gun problem in the country, but it is really interesting. I sometimes think about how this must look for the rest of the world. Between this and the accidents, just also reporting again, this happens every weekend, not July 4th only, of kids finding unsecured weapons, but just the idea of that casually we report the stories of kid put in the back seat of the car and, there's an unsecured but loaded firearm back here, and the kid found it and shot himself. And just in other countries, this must look totally insane. Leaving aside the fact that 400 people get shot over the holiday weekend, I don't even know what that looks like elsewhere.
I can't imagine. And, the insurrection,
right.
Thinking about this 6 months on. That's it. 6 months ago today.
Yeah. I guess so.
Andy Kim, Representative Andy Kim, has a really nice thread.
Oh?
I mean, a horrifying and terrifying and painful thread about what he was doing 6 months ago today. He's donated his suit, the suit he was wearing when he helped to clean up the Capitol after the attack.
Interesting.
The Smithsonian asked for it, so he's donating it to the Smithsonian. And he has a thread about that it's hard to read, but it's really good. So I can recommend that to everybody. I've retweeted it.
Okay. I will go and find that and fish that out. That's an interesting request. The suit you were wearing the day you cleaned. Well, I don't know. They are into those things at the Smithsonian. I don't know what else would you collect, but
the good and the bad.
Yeah.
They're collecting history, and I think I'm pleased that they thought of this one. That this is one of the things that's emblematic of that attack. Needs to be preserved.
Yeah.
He's never going to wear it again.
Yeah, I guess not.
He wore it for Trump's impeachment. He bought it specifically. It was bright blue, and he wanted it for Biden's inauguration, and he thought it would be appropriate to wear when they were certifying the electoral vote, and then he was going to wear it to the inauguration. And instead, he wore it for Trump's impeachment. And now it's going into the Smithsonian.
Well, very interesting. I see it here. All right, well, I'm going to round that up and share that. Yeah, it didn't even really strike me that it was the 6th. I mean, I've seen a bunch of people tweeting things, 6 months ago today, but I don't know. It didn't really hit me until just then when you said it. But yeah, so far nothing happening. By the way, on that. But I guess now we're into House will have a select committee, but we're still, I don't know. I guess we're still playing the game of Republicans. You need to nominate people, to name people to this committee, and it's not entirely clear that McCarthy will actually go ahead and do it. I assume he'll wait or delay as long as possible until Democrats come up with some response like, we'll just assign you to it. I don't know whether they'll ever do it.
I don't know, and I don't know necessarily that they have to wait. They've got a quorum already.
A majority will do, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that they're going to wait for him.
Okay.
One of the good things is that this does not have the artificial deadline that the Joint Commission that they were trying to pass had.
Yes.
The December 31st deadline,
which
is just ridiculous. So they have no deadline, and that does help.
Yeah. So I guess they could afford to, I suppose, wait if they wanted to. But yeah, you're right. Maybe they just don't want to, and as long as they can put together a quorum, if Republicans end up naming no one or refusing to name anyone to the committee, then they go and meet and presumably vote unanimously on most things and in bipartisan fashion if Lynn Cheney shows up.
And I think that the Republicans are aware of that. McCarthy's aware of it. So we're probably going to end up with a Jim Jones. Jim Jones? Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We might end up with one of those.
Spear also had a thread, and she was remembered Jonestown, and I think that was what.
It's not a bad, it's not an inexplicable mistake. I mean,
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel that that's what's going on. All right. So I don't know when I don't think I've seen any announced plans for a startup meeting yet. But
Oh, I mean, they're on recess.
yeah,
Have we talked about the recess calendar lately?
I haven't. So
They're all out this week.
yeah. Okay.
The Senate is back next week. Let me pull up my handy combined calendar here.
Okay.
If it comes up, yeah, the House is out until the 19th.
All right.
Then it leaves on the 30th
All right.
and doesn't come back until
Yeah.
September 20th.
That doesn't mean that this committee can't meet
It
during
doesn't
those
mean
times. They have been doing that.
Doesn't mean that there can't be action taken on infrastructure, the reconciliation bill. But it is sort of the other thing that's coming up toward the end of this month, middle of next month, is the debt ceiling will be reached.
Oh, yes. Okay. I have seen people discussing that a little bit.
So, yeah,
time
the
to
Senate
remind
comes
people.
back next week.
All right. So
The
they
12th, the House the 19th. They have 3 weeks to do
whatever they're
something.
doing. Yeah.
The Senate right now is scheduled to be in the first week of August. I can't see. I don't know, maybe they hold this calendar. The Senate's talked some about clawing some time away from August. The rabble rousers, the Democrats, have said, really, there's a lot going on right now. Maybe we shouldn't leave. And
Yeah.
so far that has not worked.
Not catching on with. Okay. Well, that does happen quite a bit. They go through this every year, really, but it's perhaps more imperative this time than it's been in a while. And as I mentioned, the House actually has kind of been in the habit of allowing and encouraging committee work to take place during some of these House session recesses anyway. So
Yes.
it's entirely
Which is
possible.
important and is good, and that's sort of an extension of the proxy voting that they've been doing. But it's still, is everybody going to be available for the next emergency? Like, half the country burning down.
Right. Yeah, that could be exactly what's happening if they're while they're away for August, I would imagine. Yeah, but I guess in combination with the proxy voting, maybe we're better prepared for dealing with it than in prior years, but only because we've been through a horrific pandemic to get here. It's not like it was planned. But hopefully things won't go too haywire. I would like to see what they're going to do about this committee, and I see a lot of talk from, I guess, the Democratic members who are at this point fixed for the committee, talking about their approach and what they'll be looking into. And I mean, it certainly sounds pretty comprehensive. I guess
It sounds comprehensive. It sounds like they're going to do the right thing and make it public as much as they can, televised.
Yeah.
They've talked about calling McCarthy. They've talked about calling Trump.
Yeah, that I saw today. Yeah, I don't know how he responds to that. McCarthy probably would go, but yeah, I don't know. What does Trump do with that?
Ignores it.
Yeah, I mean, my guess, right?
I mean, the one thing, they can issue subpoenas, but congressional subpoenas are easier to ignore than a lot of other subpoenas.
Well, yeah, for elected officials in particular, I mean, it's become habit now. You just ignore the ones you don't like, and then litigate your right to ignore them, and then it usually takes longer to to resolve that case than it does the cases resolving it outlive the committees in many cases, or at least their inquiries, or the term of office of the person they're investigating in many cases. But I'll just be interested to see how that plays out, and probably disappointed as opposed to surprised at how it plays out. But okay, well, at least they're getting underway with that. And you mentioned the debt ceiling coming up. Always a good opportunity to mention that you can fix debt ceiling problems, at least short term, under reconciliation. That's still in the offing, but no special rules required for that. It's written into the rules that that's okay. No bird rule considerations whatsoever.
Right. And Democrats are talking about, as they sometimes do, of just eliminating this whole voting on the debt ceiling thing and having an automatic reset for it.
Yes.
So,
yeah,
hopefully. I mean, everybody thinks this is our great opportunity. You know, if we keep having to vote on the debt ceiling, then we can force people to do the right thing. We can force them to be here and not court disaster and help us pass other must-pass things because we have to raise the debt ceiling.
But
and all of the time, it just creates undue angst.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got Mitch McConnell who says this is an extremely useful hostage.
Yeah.
I can't remember the first time he said it. I think it was 2010.
Oh.
Can't remember the first time he said that. But yes, Mitch McConnell has said, this is a really powerful hostage for us to take. And we're going to keep doing it. And they have.
Yeah. The hostage keeps coming back. So
yeah,
he must like it.
The perpetual hostage.
I guess so. All right. Well, yeah, so no, not likely to have, say, smooth sailing to just eliminating the problem by having an automatic reset, so long as, you know, it would have to pass the Senate as well, unless, of course, you know, we get rid of that one roadblock that gives them the right to keep taking this hostage over and over again.
Yeah, that.
But, you know, you all know what that is. No reason to spend any more time on that unless there's something. I don't think there's any new developments on that front.
I haven't seen any new developments.
All
I have
right.
seen an AP story now about Kirsten Sinema trying to be the next John McCain.
Oh.
So, yeah. She apparently hangs out in the Republican cloakroom sometimes.
Oh.
Which I don't think any other Democrat has ever really done.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so. There's probably not been much reason for that. I mean, it's possible somebody might have wandered through there if they were going to lunch with somebody and the Republican guy decided to exit the floor that way. And there's no lasers that, you know, fry you or anything if you walk into the wrong one. But maybe we should look into installing those. You know, and if she wanders in after a warning, nothing I can do for you. But that's interesting. I'm sure she thinks she's making friends and influencing people, and
I'm sure she thinks she is. She also spends time on the phone with Mitch McConnell, the story tells us.
That has just got to be boring. There's no real reason for that. I don't know why she does these things.
She can't really be stupid enough to think that she's swaying him, that she'll have any influence at all over McConnell. And he's not just using her, but...
Well, I don't know.
I don't know what goes on in that head.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe she's really not even doing that. She's just telling the newspaper she's doing that so that people think she's bipartisan. It'd be difficult to believe.
By all accounts, she's an intelligent person.
That's great.
She graduated high school as the valedictorian when she was 16.
Yeah, okay. That is something, right?
Has I don't know how many degrees, including a PhD. She's, you know, not unintelligent.
Well, that's good to know. I don't really know enough about her to have known that, and I worried there were some other things that made me think she wasn't.
Just be egotistical enough to think that.
Well, that wouldn't be
she can somehow have Mitch McConnell on her side. That she has the powers of persuasion.
That would
to
not
bring
be...
Mitch McConnell around to being, instead of, you know, a destroyer of everything good, a participant in democracy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah, that seems like a bit of a pipe dream. But it's not terribly uncommon to people of that sort, I guess. The type of person that would graduate at 16 as valedictorian and get advanced degrees, they frequently imagine themselves to have intellectual superpowers that they don't have. or that don't work on, people like Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
But that would explain something, maybe, of her persistence and all of that, although, I don't know. You would think that her op-ed, say, about the filibuster might have been better reasoned.
Yes.
But who knows? Maybe she didn't write
yes.
that. The person
she
who
may
wrote
have
that
just
might not
given
have
that
been
to an aide to
valedictorian.
write.
Yeah. Okay, well.
Meanwhile, what
yes.
else is happening on Info? Oh, ExxonMobil. You saw the videotape from videotape. I'm talking like it's
So I have it on beta.
The Greenpeace UK sting of the ExxonMobil lobbyist.
I have heard about it. I haven't actually seen the video recording. However you put it, myself, but yeah, lots of chatter about it.
It was pretty damning, particularly for those Democrats in the bipartisan gang putting together this infrastructure, because everyone he named as absolutely crucial to his interests happened to be on the gang.
That seems weird, though.
Manchin,
they grabbed
Sinema, Tester, Hassan, Coons, Mark Kelly.
Yeah. Well,
and Coons in particular, specifically because he's such good friends with Biden.
Yeah.
Senator Coons, McCoy said on the phone call. This was a call set up, he thought, by a headhunter looking for a high-powered lobbyist for another client.
Okay.
That's the premise that they gave him to get him to participate in this Zoom call. He thought it was an interview.
Huh.
So they, teased him out on his success in lobbying. And he talked about these crucial Democrats and about Coons, who, quote, has a very close relationship with Biden. So we've been working with his office. As a matter of fact, our CEO is talking to him next Tuesday and having those conversations and just teeing it up. And then that way I can start working with the staff to let them know where we are on some of these issues.
Okay. Well, that's disappointing to say the least. Although, on the other hand, sometimes ExxonMobil CEOs, Rex Tillerson was one. I don't know how effective, going by him, who knows what's really going on here. But somewhere they've got to have some intelligent people who are real operators, I imagine. They're sitting on a pile of money. They got it somehow. It doesn't mean they're good people.
Big ploy seems to be actually not the climate change stuff in it. It's the taxes.
Well, that's the pile of money.
Yeah, he said, we're playing defense because President Biden is talking about this big infrastructure package and he's going to pay for it by increasing corporate taxes. So they need to shrink Biden's plan down to just roads and bridges from $2 trillion to $800 billion.
Okay. Only the things
so
we
that
need
the
to
tax
move our
increases
gasoline.
would go away.
Okay.
Which is kind of,
yeah.
it's more than $800 billion that's coming from the bipartisan gang, but as $950 billion. So, and thus far does not have tax increases on ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, we still have the powerful committee chairman. We have Bernie Sanders and Ron Wyden saying, no way this passes without our separate reconciliation bill that is going to have climate change in it.
All right.
So that's where we're at. There's been no real change on infrastructure except for this ExxonMobil expose.
Well, as you mentioned that and saying that Sanders and Wyden intend to have this in climate change addressed in reconciliation, which I know will raise opposition from Republicans and, I don't know, maybe even some weirdo conservative Democrats in parts. Anyway, maybe that's a good reason to make sure that the debt ceiling is addressed in the reconciliation bill. Use the hostage in reverse.
Exactly.
Wonder if we
Hopefully
can make that happen.
Will.
Yeah. Let's call them.
But you've got nihilists on the other side who are like, well, what the hell? Let's just see what happens if we breach the debt ceiling.
Yeah. Could it be any worse than an insurrection to overthrow the U.S. government and hanging Mike Pence and destroying the Capitol? Well, it would have some worldwide implications, sure.
But,
yeah,
you know.
we got people who want to experiment with this stuff. All right. Well, hopefully it doesn't happen before next week.
Hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, we'll have a chance to check in again. Also want to catch up with you at some point about judges, because I saw you've been writing quite a bit about that. And
Yes. Put judges on the agenda for next week.
okay. Throw out throw out agenda for next week. Try not to do that. But thank you for coming by. Hope you guys cool off at some point and don't catch on fire in between. But
fingers crossed.
Yeah, good luck. Stay cool. And make sure your hose is working. I guess.
Will do. Thanks,
Joan. Okay, we'll check in with you next week again. And now time for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next here on Netroots Radio. Why don't we just use this time to see if we're ready to give you a preview of what's coming up today? As a matter of fact, we do. Let's jump right into it, shall we? Let's see. Starting off in his Bistro Cafe, political and national security experts agree the United States has entered a neo-fascist era in American politics. Hooray! I mean, boo. Well, we'll discuss that some more. And then later on, census takers worry that apartment renters were undercounted after stripping federal prosecutors in the waning days of his administration. Oh, I should have waited for this one.
From
Stay on the edge of your seat. Hang on.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
An environmental picture here for you. After stripping federal protection, in the waning days of his administration, Trump unleashed an, quote, outright slaughter of wolves in Wisconsin. And how about some news about far-right extremist militias like the 3%ers infiltrating local governments? Stay tuned for more.